Joining us now is NBC News entertainment correspondent Chloe Melas and Stephen Battaglio, staff writer at the Los Angeles Times. Chloe, what do we know about Jimmy Kimmel's return today, and what prompted Disney to say now's the time to bring him back?
In Disney's statement, they basically say that they had ongoing conversations with Jimmy Kimmel, and at the time they felt that it was the right decision to preempt him and take him off the air, given the fact that the national discord was very heated at this moment. And they actually said that Kimmel's comments about Charlie Kirk and his assassination were, quote, ill-timed, right? But now he's going back on the air. He has this monologue where he will undoubtedly address all of this that has happened. And will he lower the temperature? I mean, I want to point out that his contract is up in May of 2026. He had said a few years ago when he re-signed that he was quietly quitting. You could imagine that he's not going to want to now feel as though he cannot be himself on the air and that he's constantly in fear of losing his show. But at the same time, you have these affiliate owners, Sinclair and Nexstar, who are not going to be airing Jimmy Kimmel tonight just because Disney's putting him back on the air. They are still going to preempt his show in their local markets.
So we assume they'll be listening to hear what he has to say, because didn't Sinclair at one point say if he apologizes, maybe we'll reconsider?
That's the thing. You had Sinclair, who owns several of these ABC affiliate stations, Anna, say that under no uncertain terms would they bring him back unless he issued this groveling apology to Charlie Kirk's family and also made a donation to Kirk's organization. So there are a multitude of things that Kimmel could say tonight. I mean, I had somebody float earlier that what if he says, you know, I can't do this show anymore in fear of constantly being censored. But he also has dozens of people that work for him that have bills to pay, families to feed. And it's not just about Jimmy Kimmel. And obviously, there are all these business deals behind the scene for Disney. They need the government's approval. Bob Iger, who runs Disney, with his deal ESPN and the NFL. Then he's also trying to merge Hulu, his streamer, with another company that's worth billions of dollars. So they need the administration also to be on their good side in a way as well.
Yeah, Stephen, FCC Chair Brendan Carr really kind of set off this snowball of actions we've seen. Now he appears to be playing cleanup on those comments he made last week, where he said we can, quote, do this the easy way or the hard way when talking about ABC and stations after Kimmel's comments. Well, yesterday he said Democrats are, quote, misrepresenting the work of the FCC and that no threats were made in any shape or form to revoke licenses of ABC stations. What do you make of this apparent reversal?
I would say that it's more of a dishonest statement than a reversal. You know, he made a gangster-like statement. We can do it the easy way or the hard way. And that sent a message right away. These guys have big deals on the table. Nexstar wants to buy Tegna, another large station group, and they want that station cap lifted. Right now, the biggest concern of TV station owners is the limits on how much of the U.S. they can cover. They can only own enough stations to cover 40% of the U.S. They want that cap to go up because you're competing against tech companies, which can reach everybody, anywhere, anytime. TV stations think this is unfair, and they feel that their only path to growth is to get bigger and consolidate. And who controls the keys to consolidation? It's the FCC chairman, Brendan Carr. So you know, when he said jump, they said how high.
And that explains perhaps why Sinclair and Nexstar are digging in instead of following ABC's and Disney's lead. Of course, that decision to bring Kimmel back tonight comes after all the pushback we've seen, including from hundreds of celebrities who wrote that open letter supporting free speech, Disney Plus subscribers reportedly canceling in droves. Stephen, do you see that as a successful counter-pressure campaign from free speech advocates? Has it been effective?
The UN comes against the backdrop of Jimmy Kimmel Live being back on ABC's airwaves tonight. It comes nearly 1 week after the network suspended the late-night host amid threats of regulatory action from the FCC chair over Kimmel's comments about the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Disney, which owns ABC, announced the return in a statement yesterday, writing, quote, "Last Wednesday, we made the decision to suspend production on the show to avoid further inflaming a tense situation at an emotional moment for our country. It's a decision we made because we felt some of the comments were ill-timed and thus insensitive. We've spent the last days having thoughtful conversations with Jimmy, and after those conversations, we reached the decision to return the show on Tuesday." Some households, however, may still not see that show. Sinclair, which operates more than 30 ABC affiliates across the U.S., says it will carry news programming instead of Kimmel's return, but discussions with ABC are ongoing. Nexstar, the other major ABC affiliate owner that preempted the talk show last week, has not yet said what it plans to do. This reversal from ABC comes after days of pushback from protesters, politicians, and performers. Yesterday, just before the announcement was made, more than 400 celebrities signed a letter saying this is a dark moment for freedom of speech in our nation. Several Republican lawmakers also spoke out against the FCC's pressure on ABC. Among them, Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, calling it absolutely inappropriate, and Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, calling it dangerous as hell. Meanwhile, FCC Chairman Brendan Carr is attempting to clarify his controversial comments about Kimmel, denying that he threatened to revoke the broadcast licenses of ABC affiliates unless the network fired the late-night host. Here's what Carr said last week, followed by his new explanation yesterday.
You know, when you look at the conduct that has taken place by Jimmy Kimmel, it appears to be some of the sickest conduct possible. Frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, you know, there's going to be additional work for the FCC ahead. A very reasonable, minimal step that can be taken. I mean, obviously, look, there's calls for Kimmel to be fired. I think, you know, you could certainly see a path forward for suspension over this. And again, you know, the FCC is going to have remedies that we could look at.
A lot of Democrats out there that are engaged in a campaign of projection and distortion. And distortion is they're completely misrepresenting the work of the FCC and what we've been doing. I saw there was a letter from some Senate Democrats that said the FCC threatened to revoke the license of Disney and ABC if they didn't fire Jimmy Kimmel, and that did not happen in any way, shape, or form. And what I spoke about last week was that when concerns are raised about news distortion, there's an easy way for parties to address that and work that out. And in the main, that takes place between local television stations that are licensed by the FCC and what we call national programmers like Disney. They work that out, and there doesn't need to be any involvement of the FCC. Now, if they don't, there's a way that's not as easy, which is someone can file a complaint at the FCC, and then the FCC, by law, that's set up by Congress, has to adjudicate that complaint. And what I've been very clear in the context of the Kimmel episode is the FCC, and myself in particular, have expressed no view on the ultimate merits had something like that been filed.
I know that your parents took you to protests in a stroller when you were a little kid, before you were literally able to be there to walk, and that you've talked about the civil rights movement and its moral legacy being part of your moral core.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of the defenses that we tried to build up in advance of this type of a sort of would-be authoritarian takeover were about warning people about how serious the threat was and warning people about what this could mean and what we were in danger of. Now that we're up against it, though, I'm not sure that we have great skills to actually not warn about it, but fight it. And if the problem is the system collapsing and the guardrails, as you say, collapsing, and people who have power, who ought to be titans, not acting in any sort of Titanic
and standing
way.
together, because there is safety in numbers, as the saying goes.
Yes. I wonder if the American people who are repulsed by what Trump is doing and who are in public opinion polling very much against what he's doing, as you note in the book, are going to be turning their ire and their protest movement and their organizational capacity against these institutions that are failing as much as they are against Donald Trump himself and the administration, if that's the way the sort of resistance is headed.
So, one, back to how you opened the show, I mean, talk about the power being with the people and the people making that clear with their checkbooks. As it relates to the suspension of Jimmy Kimmel. We saw the power of the people over the last few days, and it spoke volumes, and it moved a decision in the right direction. I think that part of where we are now in terms of thinking about what the fight is, it requires us, yes, to understand that we've got this administration and this president in front of us abusing the power that the people vested him with. But we also need to understand that this is bigger than Donald Trump. You know, part of what I write about, this stuff is decades in the making, Rachel. It didn't just happen overnight. You know, so much of what has indeed overwhelmed people, not to mention just scared the stuff out of people, is what we are witnessing is a high velocity event.
Yeah.
We are witnessing something that has been happening so rapidly, and it feels chaotic. But what I would offer you is what we are witnessing is the swift implementation of a plan that was decades in the making. Decades in the making. Project 2025 didn't just drop out of thin air. That's a product of decades of work. Federalist Society, Heritage Foundation. Understand that the implementation of a plan that's about trying to get rid of the Department of Education, deregulate industries, weaken the rule of law by over a period of time, creating a system and through gerrymandering states so that we would now have the Supreme Court that we have. This stuff didn't happen overnight. And it did not happen just because of an election in 2024 or even 2016. So when we talk about where the fight must go, there is the aspect of it that is about the immediate moment, such as the weight of the federal government being used to silence critics, citizens. And it must be about understanding that this did not just happen overnight, and we have to pay attention to an agenda that is not going to necessarily go away when this guy is finally termed out of office.
What you're witnessing here is the big backdown from Trump and his cronies. There's almost never shame in the Trump movement. They almost never hide from their evil. That's one of the things that makes them sort of unique, because Republicans have always been like this. I really hate the romanticization of past Republicans being like, oh, Ronald Reagan would have hated this. I was like, no, Ronald Reagan was a right-wing ghoul who, at least so far, we have to see what Trump's effects are over the decades, right? But has hurt America more than Trump has. Like, right, give Trump time, right? Like, to see what Trumpism does in 20, 30 years. But, like, the reality is, though, there's a lack of shame with the Trump movement. They do it and they're proud. And they sort of say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Right? Here, though, they're backing down. You see the Trump's FCC guy. And he was super proud of it. Remember, the reason this is a big scandal, yes, Kimmel being fired is news in and of itself, but the reason it went global, the reason it was the biggest piece of news for a few days in the entire world was because Trump's FCC guy, a few hours before it happened, went on a big right-wing podcast and said, we can do it the easy way, we can do it the hard way, saying to companies, to Disney and to the carriers and all of that, you could remove Kimmel on your own choice, on your own volition, by your own free will, or we could, revoke your license, modify your license without your consent, prevent any sort of business deals you have, and really put the screws to you. Like, officially censor you if you don't unofficially censor yourself. And now he's backing down, and conservatives are backing down because they know it looks bad. They thought it was fine. They thought people would cheer them on as they violated the First Amendment, or at least the spirit of the First Amendment. But now that it didn't work and Kimmel's back and people are mad, including some Republicans, including pro-MAGA Republicans like Ted Cruz, because of all of that, they're backing down. That's a big sign of victory. Trump and his movement almost never apologize, almost never clarify, almost never shy away from their own schemes, except for when, one, they're deeply criminal. I don't know if that's the case here. Or two, they're that damaging. And that's bad news for them.